This program is presented by Keep the Faith, a nonprofit Catholic lay apostolate devoted to spreading the teachings of Holy Mother Church.
Go tell the world about Mary. Go tell the world about her joy. God the Creator was her little boy, and she'd lull him to sleep with a song for him deep in her heart. Go tell the world about Mary. Go tell the world about her pain. God the Redeemer was her young son slain, and his love she would keep and would ponder it deep in her heart.
Today we again have the privilege of talking with Mr. Frank Duff. In a previous interview, Mr. Duff told us about one of the first works of the Legion of Mary with the street girls in Dublin, which resulted in the establishment of the first Legion hostel, Sancta Maria. As a result of that work, the Legion then attacked Bentley Place, which was known at that time in 1923 as one of the dens of prostitution and other related vices. In my visit to the Concilium office last night, I saw on the wall a crucifix which was used in that work at Bentley Place, and I also know that you've written a book, Miracles on Tap, about Bentley Place. But today we would like to have your personal remembrances of that work in 1923. Would you like to tell us about it?
Willie. To give you any sort of description of that celebrated district would require an extensive treatment. And I will not attempt that because it could take up a very great portion of the time at our disposal. But just let it suffice to say that it was a historical place going back into the 1700s. And from time to time, authority tried to rid the place of some of its awful renown by changing the name of the place, as if that would represent a cleaning up. But of course, the ill odor transferred itself to the new name at once. In any case, the old names also survived, and it was even in our day known very much as Monto. Monto being an abbreviation of Montgomery Street. And there were other names, Tyrone Street and various other slang names. And let me inform you that Bentley Place is not the real name at all.
I didn't know that.
Bentley Place was a coined expression, not to localize, not to draw opprobrium on the people living around there at this time. So everybody in Ireland knew about this place, of course, and it has an unfavorable mention in the Encyclopedia Britannica in its article on prostitution. That was the 10th edition of that book. And if he speaks of its carrying on its operations with a greater degree of publicity and non-interference than almost any other place in the entire world. It picks out Algeria as a place which could rival Dublin in that respect. That was not so good. Shiploads of sailors used to come down there in groups, big groups of them. They knew where to come. And this was all excused on the ground that it kept the evil in one spot, instead of having houses all over the city. So that was Bentley Place as it stood in our time. It first became practical politics for us when in the Sancta Maria hostel one week at our ordinary meeting, a girl, one of the girls of the house, was reported as having left during the week and as having gone down to live in this place. So that provoked an animated discussion. And the immediate proposition that we send people down there after her, because that idea of following up was an essential portion of the work. But the suggestion of so sending people was at once attacked on the ground that that was an impossibility. You could not possibly send a respectable person into that district, that the dangers were many. So that didn't exactly satisfy the uprising Legion spirit. And it was faced up to that the work would have to be attempted. Then followed some reconnoitering, the effort to find exactly what the whole place was like and to reduce it to whatever degree of safety could be aspired to. And we did a lot of going around tackling people. Strange to say, the great majority of people, when approached, knew really very little about the thing. You wouldn't learn much from talking to them. Even people living beside the place would not be very fruitful. And to give you an example of this tone which surrounded it, I went down to one of the priests into whose district this area nominally fell. And I asked him to do me the great favor of walking with me through the district in broad daylight. In that one place, walk right through it, stopping to talk to nobody at all. But just the idea being that I'd be seen in the company of the priest, because I was not working up to that time on the north side of the city, but on the south. And I'd be unknown, and my advent, as I pointed out to him, might be regarded with all sorts of suspicions. I wasn't coming in for the purposes of the place. What was my objective? What was my game? And it was just to have that little hallmark placed upon me of being seen with him that I asked for that. Now, he was one of the finest people imaginable. Most, as other circumstances have proved, most heroic type of man. And his answer to that suggestion of mine was, my knees would go from under me. because it was a place of lies and rumours and everything of that kind, and he didn't know what sort of use would be made of that visit to the place by him.
It was dangerous just with the two of you going along?
It wasn't physical danger he was thinking of, it was lying. The suggestion that he was frequenting the district. See, that's what he wouldn't. If it was only a physical thing, he'd have run down with me. But so in spite of all, I didn't get very much information. However, we fixed a day when the entry to the place would be made, and it was agreed that the approach would be made by Miss Plunkett and myself. So at 11 o'clock in the morning, we met, and we went down to this place. Bentley Place was off a street where the name of which had originally been Tyrone Street, and in those days Tyrone Street was really the main centre. Now it has shifted a little bit to the east, and the name of Tyrone Street had been changed to Railway Street, and Bentley Place was off Tyrone Street, off Railway Street. And then the area itself consisted of several smaller streets, the whole of that area. Now, in my looking around for something that we could use, I had got hold of the name of a girl living down there. And this was not the girl who had only gone there, because I had no address for her, except the broad area. But I did have a precise address for another girl. And there's no harm in telling it out now. And that's what her name was, Mary Tait. And she lived in number 8 of the place that I'm calling Bentley Place. And I remember that by means of putting it into a nursery rhyme, Mary Tait of number 8. I held on to that like glue. And so that meant that when we came to the entrance to Bentley, actual entrance to Bentley Place, we looked at the numbers and we found that the first number on the left-hand side was number 1, and the number on the other side was number 20 or 21. That meant that somewhere at the very far end was number 8. Normally, we'd do our work with a certain amount of method, and we would take probably number 1. All the more so as it kept us a little nearer civilization, so to speak. You were very close.
You had a quick escape.
Yeah, so you're ready to escape. And so we proceeded to walk down the place. It was a beautiful day. And of course, no, it was not business hours at all, in that hour in the morning. But there were a fair amount of people just loitering around. And we were, our very strangely assorted pair became at once an object of curiosity. And I was wondering now, at what stage would this produce an intervention? At what stage would we be asked our business? So, as we proceeded, there was a terrible-looking, poor derelict of a man lolling up against one of the walls of the house. One of these unutterably dejected creatures. And soon as we became near enough to him for him to identify, he came into life. And he shambled out into a way, into a path. And I said to myself, now we're for it. I just wouldn't know what would happen, because the place had a terrible name for happenings. To my unutterable surprise, he seized my hands and hailed me by name. And then I recognized him as a poor creature with whom I had been in contact over on the other side of the city. Apparently I had been helpful to him because he was friendliness itself.
That was a good break.
Grace greeted me with my name, and this was terribly fortunate, because it gave me the introduction that I had been looking for and couldn't get. Here's one of themselves, who gave me really more than the priest would. Because the fact that the priest would only mean, could mean that he was instructing me in how to break up the place.
Right.
Whereas this hallmark, which now descended on me, was the best possible. And for that reason, I delayed talking. And so that everybody, or as many people as possible, would get a knifeful of it. So I bade him at the farewell when I thought that this was accomplished. And we resumed our walk. This time rid of a certain amount of the apprehension. We felt a great thing had been accomplished. Now we found that number 8 was the third last house on the left-hand side. And we came down to it, and the whole door was open, as most of them were always. And we went in and knocked at the first door on in the hall on the left-hand side, what would be called, in the phraseology of those types of houses, the front parlour. And somebody shouted out, "Come in." And we went in, and there were 4 girls standing in the room. It was obvious what they were. Handsome young girls. And there was a 5th one in bed. And I once used our passport phrase, does Mary Tait live here? Now let me explain that in the narrative, which is, contains a very expanded account of all these things, she is put down as Mary Line of number 9 in order to conceal her identity. But we ask her now, there's the name we ask her. There she is in the bed. Oh, she seems to be very, very sick. Yeah, she's dying. And I went over to her, both of us did, and she certainly did look as if she was about to expire. It was in a terrible state. And I then addressed myself to the other girls, and I said, has she had the priest? The priest won't come down here. Has she had the doctor? She won't let us send for the doctor. Now, at this time, my confidence was very fully restored. And I said to them, do you mean to say you're going to let her die there like a dog? Now, what can we do? So at that, I went outside and nearly opposite, sitting on a window ledge, was a young tough, one of the unofficial police of the area who used to be known as bullies. And I beckoned to him, and he came over to me. This was a new business. I was being obeyed. And I said to him, look, would you mind going around to Store Street and bringing a cab? We're taking Mary Tait to hospital. Right, oh. And he flashed off. And I went back into the room and I gave instructions that they should get her ready to be taken over to hospital. And the girls set to work on that, and I went and stood outside. And after a very short time, up rolled the old four-wheeler cabs. The taxis were only coming in around that time. And in a few minutes, we had the poor girl in the cab and accompanied by two of her companions. It rolled off to the old venereal hospital in Dublin, over in a place called Townsend Street. And when she arrived there, they did not, the first thing they did was to bring the priest, because she was very near death. And the matron of the place, with whom we had a lot of subsequent contact, told us that 1 hour longer without medical attention, that girl was dead.
You
1 hour. So that was that struck us with horrible force. You would realize from the legionary point of view, we would regard that as a sign. And here was this girl on the point of death, and as if we were led by her angel guardian, we went straight to her, no intervening house at all, just straight to her. And so with medical attention, she lived for 6 weeks in the place. And she repeated, we were visiting that hospital actually at the time. And she said to us, to our members repeatedly, that she hoped she would not recover, that she was very fit to die and she wanted to die. And just before her death, she called on the others in the ward to join her in the rosary, and she died on its conclusion.
Isn't that interesting?
And then she was buried in our great cemetery of Glasnevin, and we all attended the funeral, and the population of Bentley Place attended it, and such an outfit gathered together you never saw. But however, now that was consoling to the last degree. And a funny thing about it was that many years later, I was destined to pick up all the threads of that girl's life, because we were doing a congress down in Mullingar. And I was telling them, it was after the congress itself, this was late at night. And I was in the house of the president. We were getting some tea or something. And they wanted to hear about this adventure, and I was telling them something about it. And when I mentioned her name, there was a terrific explosion of excitement. She had been the local mystery. This girl, at the time aged about 18, had suddenly disappeared and was never again heard of. And it was the big mystery of the whole locality, what had happened to her. And I come along and I'm able to tell the whole sequel. It was really very wonderful. But so then, now that puts Miss Plunkett and myself in the room in number 8, along with the 2 other girls. So we had a brief chat with them, and they suggested we come over to their house. They were only visitors in number 8. And we went over to another house on the other side of the road, and there were 3 girls in that house. That was the room we went into. And we settled down, Miss Blanche, myself, settled down to tell them about Sancta Maria and to appeal to them to go and do likewise. And they listened again, they had heard about it. And they listened very eagerly, really, to the whole account. And so far we were having a time which was exactly the opposite to what our anticipations had painted. But while we were talking, a young fellow came into the room, I'd say 22 years of age or thereabouts. A handsome young fellow, whom I subsequently christened Rudolfo Valentino. He was the reigning film star at the time. But so I said to myself when he came into the room, he has been sent in to get rid of us. But instead of coming over and joining in our conversation, he went to the fireplace, put his elbow up on the mantelpiece, and listened intently. So as his coming in, I had stiffened myself up for a sudden rush on his part, because we were not going to leave just because we were requested to do so. But that would take a lot of living down about our great exploits and going down and walking out very meekly. So that was not going to happen. And but while I had one eye on him, I ceased to talk when he came in and let it go on with the others. And but eyeing him, I could see no evidence of viciousness there. Seemed to be listening really. And after just observing him for a moment or two, I went over to him. And I entered into chat with him, and I found an extraordinary sad position. He was one of the bullies, all right. He was actually the brother of one of the girls with whom we were talking. The name of that of his sister was Victoria Smith, and he was something Smith. I forget his first name now, but he freely spoke to me. Said he was very badly placed, and that he was living down there, and he said he was a shoplifter by day and a bully by night. And I argued with him about the dreadful character of that life. He agreed cordially with me. He said, yeah, of course, it's all very well, but there was no way of getting out of it. That was his position. He said he would welcome any chance. So I gave him a note to Father Devan, and I asked Father Devan to insert him into the schedule for the retreats in Rathfarnham Castle, and also to give him some time and see what could be done to help him. He gave me a promise that he would present that note, and he did. He made the retreat, and Father Devan sent him over to Liverpool into a job.
Wonderful.
And years after that, he visited me here. A steady-going customer. Had been in employment all the time, and a complete success. So that was very wonderful. Then after dealing in that room, we left that room, usually escorted by one of the girls as an introducer of us. And we got through a lot of the area. And one of the item of it was extraordinary. Now, up to this point, we had been dealing with very neat, well-dressed girls who didn't, although I suppose everybody down there drank. But at that time of the morning, in any case, we didn't, no sign of drink had presented itself to us, and the girls were tidy and nice. But we came up into another place, and we ran again up against a totally different order. The battered type that had been on the streets for a great number of years and had sunk with every day, and who were perpetual drinkers, and who were clad in rags, and whose appearance was generally dreadful. But among this outfit, I reckon there were about 8 of them in one house. Among this crowd was a great willingness to listen to you, and an apparent possession of good faith, and they were very extraordinarily nice to us. And while we were talking the whole lot under ourselves, another one came in with a big quart bottle of methylated spirits, and a jug of water and some glasses. Well, the moment this came in, they were all transformed, and they all forgot us. And they came over and they grouped themselves around the provider. And each woman in turn would be given 2 glasses. And she'd get a dose of methylated spirit. That's what was in the thing, in one glass. and then the other glass would be filled to the brim with water. And it was like a witch's rite. Really was. It was the most uncanny thing. I had never seen anything like it before. Their eyes were riveted on that bottle, as if it was the strangest thing in the world. So they got into a circle, and the person coming in passed around the circle, giving this to each one in turn. The methylated spirits were drained off, followed by pouring in of the water. And when they went to round the whole lot, a new spirit seemed to take possession, and they formed into a ring-a-rosy and proceeded to run or dance around the whole place in a circle. And some of them seized Miss Plunkett and myself and pulled us into the revolving ring. If you had your apparatus to take that, oh, you'd have made much more than $1 million.
We'd have blackmailed you for life.
I often wonder. So this thing went on for some time, a witch's dance. And then they began to throw themselves onto, there were some beds in the room, and they began to throw themselves onto the beds to get sleep. And we couldn't get any more conversation with them. But in the time that we had been dealing with them, we had told them that we were opening a retreat on the following Saturday evening. And in 76 Hawkwood Street itself, because after the number 2 retreat in Baldoyle, that convent became unavailable to us. The superiors of the order became apprehensive of associating the convent too much with that type of work, because they were running, as I told you, a holiday home and a weekend retreat house out there. So we had to look around for other accommodation, and we weren't able to get it. And then we took the big step of saying we'd hold it in the house. So this was to be the first retreat held in the house itself, Sancta Maria. The ladies had eagerly agreed to go. But when we moved away from that room, the amount of reliance that we placed upon their promises was precisely nil. We did not know whether they would even recall the conversation when they sobered up.
Right.
But it was the spectacle of depravity was great, because that methylated spirit drinking, which was the alternative to the more refined drinks, partly because, of course, it was cheap, and partly because its kick was very great. And actually, it had the extraordinary power that you might be, say, hours and hours since you took the dose of it, and to take a drink of water revived the effects. And it was depraving in its effects. So perhaps, now, on the following Friday, yes, they had pointed out, and very obviously, truthfully, that a difficulty in the way of their coming over on the retreat was the state of their clothing. And that was as true as could be, because they were in a ghastly condition. Rags, real rags.
Sad.
And we promised them clothing. And on the following it had now got to be pretty late. I would say it was now 5 o'clock in the evening. In other words, we had spent the whole day down there. And in that whole day, one nasty word had not been addressed to us, nor had one hand been raised against us.
Surprising.
Well, this was a surprise of surprises. And we hurried off over to Sanctuary to tell the tale. And it was received with amazement. We told them that we had, in their name, arranged for this retreat, because we had got so many promises. I would be inclined to say that we got 40 promises.
Amazing.
During that day. Did ever anybody hear of such an unexpected change in prospects? Oh, that sparked off all the preparations for the retreat. And it also meant that we would have to forage around and get some clothing for them. And on the following Friday, that would be the day before the retreat would begin, Miss Massey, who I think was at that time the president of the Presidium, splendid girl who died only comparatively recently. And I, with a couple of suitcases, went down, and we went to this particular house where all the ladies were. And, well, strange to say, we found that they remembered their promises, and they followed the scene of the distribution of the clothes. And this was equivalent for strangeness to the witch dance of the previous time, because they fought like tigers for the articles of clothing, and then proceeded without any botheration about us. Or me, perhaps, I suppose, to bring it down to the one male present. They proceeded to change into the new garments. Well, the thing was extraordinary. So during the course of this business, one of the women beckoned to me and brought me outside into the street. And she said to me, I'd say she was about 38 years of age, one of the elder brethren. And she said to me, you must take me away with you now. Oh, well, I said, there are difficulties in the way of that. We're not quite ready. You have to take me away now, she says, because I hate this life and I want to finish with it, but I'll never find my way over if you don't take me over now. Well, now, I've mentioned to you already that we're in the grip of something that we now repudiate. And we attached a sort of an undue influence to the retreat. We regarded it as part of a ritual that the girls had to conform to, that was the guarantee of a girl's good intention and a fortifying of her in that good intention, and this was necessary. And this meant that we had to take her over into the house and keep her there without the retreat and We just didn't conform to the pattern of the moment. And at the same time, I said to myself, well, now we'll have to do something for her. So a thought came to me. I wrote to the matron of that venereal hospital. And I asked her as a favour to take this girl in and keep her for the night. And if he could manage it, to escort her over to Sancta Maria on the following evening when the retreat was to begin. And I gave my lady this letter. Now, on the following evening, when I entered Sancta Maria myself, in preparation for the retreat, this lassie was the first person to come and greet me.
Wonderful.
It had all worked out perfectly. And there she was, sober and clean, and you might say I had to look 6 times at her before I recognised. Well, now, she had been 16 years on the streets. And during a very great portion of that time, she had been a methylated spirit drinker. Now, that girl never looked back. Her behaviour in the hostel was exemplary. And now, after she was there perhaps for a couple of months, 3 months perhaps, she came to me one day and she took me aside. And she said, there's a fellow, she said, living down there, and that meant in that locality of Bentley, general neighbourhood of Bentley Place. There's a fellow down there, she said, and he often said he'd marry me if he could rely on me. And I want you to go down to him and tell him that I'm making an attempt. So I took his name and address, and I went down to see him one Saturday afternoon. He was a docker by profession. And I went into his room, and he was sitting on his bed reading the papers. One of the toughest looking fellows you could imagine, a powerful, tough fellow. He said to me, what do you want? So I told him that I came from this girl and that what she had said to me. And yes, I like her very much. Yes, I did say that to her. And I'm willing, if you can believe her. I gave him my impressions about her, and that I thought she was full of good intention and that sort of thing, and her behaviour up to that time had been splendid. Asked a question or two, and then he remained silent for a definite interval. And then he looked at me and he said, I'll marry the old hen. Now, that wasn't the other case that I told you previously of our first retreat and anything, where I also had the same mission to perform. This is a different, totally different case.
I remember that.
And they were married. This was married, and according to the fairy tale phrase, they lived happily ever afterwards. That girl never looked back.
That's wonderful.
Now, these are what I'd call first-class miracles. Now, after that, now, just a word about the retreat itself. After giving those clothes to that nest, we then proceeded, Miss Massey and I proceeded to go around to try to remind the girls that we had spoken to before about the retreat being arranged and all that. But it was a disastrous experience. See, this was late afternoon now, and the place was already in full swing. We only met some of the girls by accident. The place was thronged with men. Drink was already showing its effects. And you couldn't imagine anybody turning up to a retreat. You couldn't get anybody to speak to. Just a mad frenzy prevailing all around you. So we departed very dispirited indeed. And not knowing what the retreat was going to work out to. But on Saturday night, we found that we had, as far as I recall now, I think it's right, 9 from that area.
That's very good.
9 from that area alone. And then we had got a few more from the old lodging houses on the south side of the city. And in any case, we had perhaps 13 or 14 on retreat, in addition to the girls who were in the house. And that went off very successfully. And there was another terrific restoration. There was a girl called Maggie Ballard. And Maggie Ballard was known as the Queen of the Spunkers. Spunk being a counter expression for methylated spirit. Normally it's slang for courage. Courage. But it also used to be to designate methylated spirit. And she was called the Queen of the Spunkers, and she had been 22 years down there. She was originally from Glasgow, and she was one of those who turned up, and who was a perfect restoration from the first second, and never looked back. And afterwards, after she'd been with us for some time, we set inquiries on foot and managed to, her aid of course, to restore her to a family in Glasgow. Now, that was retreat number 1 in the house. And it was the beginning of our Bentley Place campaign. Now this assumed a different character to our previous manoeuvrings around the low-class lodging houses, because we had now a district on our hands. And this meant that we arranged to visit, that is, I was this, on every Friday evening to visit the place. And I always took a group of the lady legionaries with me, and varying that group to some extent, not taking a different group each time, but just bringing in a newcomer. So this is the training of the experience would be the property of a lot of people after a while. Right. This was tremendous. And to see they had never done that sort of work before, to see the absolute efficiency and courage with which they took it on. It was unbelievable. So in addition to that, from that moment, we also, a group of the legionaries went down every Sunday morning without any man with them, on the pretext of reminding them about the obligation of Mass. That was why it was a pretext, because you hadn't a chance of getting anybody. They were sleeping off the debauch of the night before, and a lot of the ladies there would use their tongues on the visitors and that sort of thing, and the visitors would be lucky in getting off with that. But that then became the routine, and that was found out altogether. Then that visitation picked off a girl every now and then. And by this time we had made up our minds that its stiff adherence to the retreat as a condition of entering the house was wrong. And that meant that if you picked up a girl in the place, you bring her off at once to Sancta Maria. And out of both, well, not out of the Sunday morning, but out of the Friday visitation, every now and then we'd pick up a girl and take her off. The routine there was that if you got a girl to consent, our whole party left. That is, we did not leave either the girls or myself down there. They were a sort of protection for me, and I was a protection for them.
Right.
So we worked more or less as a unit. Well, that didn't mean that we three of us went around hand in hand.
I see we only have another minute or two on this tape, and I would like to conclude this part of the interview and possibly pick it up in another interview a little later.
Go tell the world about Mary. Go tell the world about her place, Mother of Christ in the whole human race. And his life she will keep, and will care for it deep in each heart. Go tell the world about Mary.
This program is presented by Keep the Faith, a nonprofit Catholic lay apostolate devoted to spreading the teachings of Holy Mother Church.
Go tell the world about Mary. Go tell the world about her joy. God the Creator was her little boy, and she'd lull him to sleep with a song for him deep in her heart. Go tell the world about Mary. Go tell the world about her pain. God the Redeemer was her young son slain, and his love she would keep, and would ponder it deep in her heart.
Welcome back to the second part of our program on Bentley Place. I was wondering, Mr. Duff, if any unusual happening took place about this time in your work at Bentley Place.